The wind outside Fair Hollow High School had turned vicious, slamming dead leaves against the old brick walls like impatient fingers. It was nearly 8 in the evening, and the hallways had long since emptied. The fluorescent lights above buzzed in steady protest, flickering at random, casting erratic shadows along the walls. But in the basement, 2 floors below the gymnasium, history teacher Eleanor Ellie Rhodes was immersed in another world entirely. The basement was a relic itself. It smelled of rust, paper, and the faint trace of mildew that no janitor had managed to scrub out in decades. Down here, time moved slower. The school's archived documents, yearbooks, and photographs lay scattered in metal filing cabinets and collapsing cardboard boxes. Ellie, meticulous and patient by nature, had volunteered to digitize everything for the school's 200th anniversary. A small part of her hoped she'd find something unusual, something forgotten, though not in the way she ultimately would. That night, her fingers brushed across a thin manila envelope at the bottom of a stack labeled pre-1900. It was brittle, as if even the touch of modern light would break it apart. In careful, faded ink, someone had written, "Class of 1890. Fair Hollow Schoolhouse." Inside was a single photograph. Ellie removed it with the caution of an archaeologist. It was sepia-toned, worn at the edges but otherwise intact. It showed 2 neat rows of children, around 7 to 12 years old, standing on a dirt path in front of the original schoolhouse, a wooden structure that had been destroyed in a mysterious fire in 1912. The children's expressions were blank, almost eerily uniform. No one smiled. That was typical of photographs from the era, she reminded herself. But even so, there was a strange weight to their gazes. Their eyes felt too still. Behind the children stood a man, presumably the schoolmaster. He was tall, bony, with sunken cheeks and what appeared to be deep scarring along the left side of his face. His hands rested stiffly on the shoulders of the 2 boys in front of him, though his grip looked more like restraint than reassurance. Ellie scanned the photograph on her desktop scanner, waiting for the soft beep as the digital image appeared on her screen. She began zooming in, intending to label each visible face and compare it to old school rosters. But as the image sharpened, she paused. The second girl from the left in the front row, a child with braids and wide, unblinking eyes, had something in her gaze. At first, Ellie thought it was just an anomaly, maybe a speck of damage or a reflection. But no, it was too deliberate. There was a shape mirrored in the girl's pupils, a face, but it wasn't hers. The image was distorted, stretched, a mouth opened unnaturally wide in a scream, eyes bulging as if the face were being pulled through water. Ellie stared, breath caught as she adjusted the contrast. The image became clearer. It was there. She quickly checked another child, a boy seated on the far right. In his eyes, another reflection, a tall, gaunt figure looming behind him. But in the full photograph, there was no one there. Her pulse quickened. She scanned face after face, each child's eyes revealing a unique horror, a rotted hand reaching from the shadows, a figure crouched low with its head tilted impossibly to one side, a mouth filled with teeth far too many for a human. Some even seemed to contain tiny script, symbols she didn't recognize, etched in flickering white just along the rim of their irises. They looked like carvings, ritualistic and precise. The room grew colder. She wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself, fingers trembling as she moved the mouse. Her breath fogged slightly in front of her. Suddenly, the overhead light flickered 3 times. Then, a loud pop and darkness. The monitor remained lit for half a second longer, then blinked off. Ellie sat in silence, surrounded by pitch black, the hum of the old pipes now replaced by something quieter, something intentional. Then the screen came back, but the photograph was gone. Every file in the scanned folder deleted. All that remained on the screen was a plain white background and a single line of black text typed across it. "You shouldn't be looking." Her heart pounded in her ears. She pushed back from the desk, chair wheels scraping loudly. The silence in the basement felt alive, thick with a presence just beyond her vision. She fumbled for her phone. No signal. Then, from behind the rows of filing cabinets, came the slow, deliberate sound of a footstep, then another, and then breathing, heavy, wet, coming closer. Ellie grabbed her flashlight and pointed it toward the noise. The beam caught only dust, swirling like smoke in the air. Nothing. But the breathing continued. Closer now, impossibly close. Then, from the far corner, something whispered her name. Eleanor. Eleanor didn't remember standing. One moment she was staring at the glowing monitor and that impossible message. The next, she was backing away from the desk, flashlight trembling in her hand. Breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat. Eleanor. The whisper had come from behind the rows of cabinets. It wasn't a groan of the pipes, or the settling of the foundation. It was unmistakably human, and worse, it knew her name. She swung the flashlight toward the sound. Metal shelves lined with papers and boxes cast long, jagged shadows along the walls. The beam quivered as she stepped forward, forcing herself to look between the shelves. Nothing, but then, a faint scraping, like fingernails against cardboard. Ellie froze. Her rational mind begged her to leave, to run up the stairs and never come back. But something deeper, darker, anchored her. The same instinct that made her dig through forgotten files now drove her steps forward. She turned the final corner between the shelves. No one, only a single box, half open, labeled Fair Hollow Orphan Registry, 1889-1891. She stared at it, pulse hammering in her ears. Her fingers reached out, almost against her will, and lifted the top. Inside, rows of brittle pages detailed the names of children who had once lived in the orphanage that predated the school. Ellie's eyes scanned the list. Nora K. Elridge, age 9. Deceased Franklin Voss, age 12. Deceased Maribel Carter, age 7. Deceased dozens of names, all marked the same way. Deceased. She flipped through. Each year brought more of the same. Children who had supposedly died of illness, accident, exposure. Then, at the bottom of one page, all 13 students of class 1890. Cause of death, undetermined. Case closed by order of Headmaster Silas Vexley. The name sent a ripple through her. Silas Vexley, the man in the photograph. Ellie stumbled back from the box, bile rising in her throat. The children in that photo, they were all dead, every single one, and something had been watching them, even back then. Her flashlight flickered. Then, a loud, sudden bang from the other end of the basement. She turned sharply. The scanner lid had slammed shut. She hadn't touched it. Before she could move, the monitor lit up again, this time without booting. It simply activated, screen glowing, as though summoned by something unseen. The photo had returned, but the children were gone. The schoolhouse remained, empty. No rows of boys and girls, no schoolmaster, only the dark windows of the building, and in those windows, faint outlines, not reflections, figures, faces pressed to the glass, their eyes black, watching. A low hum began to rise from the speakers, a sound she hadn't heard before, like a reversed whisper. Then came a high-pitched tone, and Ellie's nose began to bleed. She staggered backward, grabbing her coat and keys in a single motion, and bolted up the stairs. The door to the basement, usually creaky and sluggish, slammed shut behind her with enough force to shake the hallway lights. She didn't look back. She didn't stop running until she reached her car. At home that night, Ellie tried to sleep. She wrapped herself in blankets, kept every light on, and placed the photo in the freezer. The only irrational defense her panicked mind could conceive. But sleep didn't come, because the whisper returned. This time, not from a distant shadow or behind steel cabinets, but from the inside of her bedroom wall. Come back. The next morning she returned to the school. She had to know. The morning air in Fair Hollow was damp with fog, clinging to the streets like gauze over an open wound. Ellie drove to the school in silence, gripping the steering wheel too tightly, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror far more often than necessary. Sleep had eluded her completely, and her thoughts churned with impossible images, hollow faces in windows, whispers behind walls, and the sickening realization that something ancient and cruel had been staring back at her through the eyes of long-dead children. The school was empty. It was Saturday. She used her staff key to slip in through the side entrance and descended the basement stairs, half expecting resistance, but the door opened without a sound. The space below was unchanged, the faint scent of old paper, cold concrete, and the heavy silence of neglect. Except now the box labeled Fair Hollow Orphan Registry, 1889-1891, was sitting on top of the desk. She hadn't left it there. Slowly she opened it again. The pages were the same, brittle and yellowed, but something new was tucked inside. A folded slip of paper, clearly not from the same era. It was cleaner, written in shaky handwriting with blue ink. He watches through the ones who see. Beneath the note was a photograph, not the group photo. This one was individual, a close-up portrait of a single girl. Ellie recognized her immediately, the second child from the left in the original image, the one with the hollow-eyed reflection. Her name, scrawled on the back, made Ellie shudder. Maribel Carter, subject 13. 13. Ellie sat down, breath shallow. She flipped back through the orphan registry. There had only been 12 children listed as part of the 1890 class. 12 names, 12 deaths. But Maribel Carter hadn't been on the list. She hadn't been buried. No cause of death, no mention at all. Only a photograph, a name, and a number. Subject 13. She checked again. Every mention of Maribel had been scratched out, not erased, violently removed. Even the ink beneath had gouged the page. It was deliberate, like someone had tried to wipe her out of history. Suddenly, a loud metallic thud echoed through the basement. Ellie spun in her chair. The lights dimmed. Footsteps approached, but not from the hallway, from behind the far wall. Then came a rhythmic knock, slow and methodical. on the concrete itself. Knock, 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 and then silence. With heart pounding, Ellie moved toward the wall. It was bare concrete, stained from age and moisture, but something in the pattern caught her eye. Faint lines, almost imperceptible. She reached out and pressed her hand against the surface. It moved. A thin section of the wall pushed inward with a groan, revealing a narrow passageway descending even deeper beneath the school. She stared into the opening. The air wafting out was cold and dry, laced with a metallic scent, like rust and blood. Against all logic, she stepped inside. The staircase was stone, spiraling downward, lit faintly by old lantern fixtures embedded in the walls. The deeper she went, the more oppressive the air became. The silence was so complete, she could hear the blood in her ears. Then she saw it, a door, heavy, wooden, ancient. Carved into it were 13 symbols, identical to the ones she had seen in the children's eyes, those impossible markings like ritual sigils. Her hand trembled as she reached for the handle, but before she could touch it, a soft sound broke the silence, a child's laugh. She turned. At the bottom of the stairs stood a girl, pale, wearing a dress from another century. Her eyes were black, not like ink, but like voids, bottomless, the kind of black that pulls. "You found me," the girl whispered. Ellie opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The girl took a step closer. "He never left, you know. He just needed eyes." Then, the door creaked open by itself behind Ellie. Inside, something moved, something with breath. The breath behind the door was not human. It was too deep, too rhythmic, like a sleeping engine, pulsing with restrained violence. Ellie felt its vibration through the stone beneath her feet. Each exhale seemed to reach inside her chest, brushing against her heart with invisible fingers. Behind her, the little girl still stood, head tilted, eyes like wells with no bottom. "He's been waiting," she whispered, her voice distant, like it came from inside a tunnel. "We were just the beginning." Ellie turned to face her, words finally forming in her throat. "Who are you?" The girl smiled faintly. "I'm what they tried to forget." Then she vanished, not walked away, not faded, vanished, as if cut from reality in a single blink. Ellie's legs buckled slightly. She reached for the stone wall for balance, her hand landing on one of the strange symbols etched beside the door. It pulsed, faintly warm, like blood just beneath skin. Something was alive in the stone. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The hinges groaned like dying animals. Inside was a chamber lit by dim, flickering oil lamps that looked like they hadn't been touched in over a century, and yet they burned. The room was circular, stone-walled, and at its center was a massive mirror, at least 2 meters tall, framed in dark wood that pulsed with veins like petrified muscle. Around the base of the mirror, 13 chairs stood in a ring. 12 were empty. The 13th held a body, dried, mummified, still dressed in the rags of an old school uniform. Its head hung forward, face collapsed inward, but Ellie recognized it. It was Silas Vexley, the schoolmaster from the photo. She stepped forward slowly, gaze locked on the corpse, and on the mirror. At first it showed only her reflection, pale, trembling, eyes wide with disbelief. Then the glass shifted. The reflection no longer matched her movements. The figure inside the mirror stared back with hollow eyes. Its mouth was slowly opening. Ellie stumbled backward. The corpse in the chair groaned. She froze. Its head rose. Impossible. Its eyes opened, or rather, the black pits where eyes had once been. Its jaw stretched downward, cracking, and a voice emerged, layered and distant, as though echoing through every stone in the room. "You broke the seal. Now you must see." The mirror shimmered. Ellie turned to it again. Now it showed the classroom of 1890. The children sat silently at wooden desks, eyes forward, except their eyes were no longer human. They were mirrors, each child's gaze reflecting not the room, but something else. A cave, fire, rituals, screams. Ellie watched as one by one the children rose and walked to the center of the classroom. Silas stood waiting, arms outstretched, and then, in perfect, horrific synchronicity, each child gouged out their own eyes. She screamed. The mirror went black. The corpse in the chair stood. "We needed vessels. We needed eyes. Yours were offered freely." The lamps extinguished. Darkness swallowed the chamber, but Ellie felt something slip behind her eyes. A pressure, a pulse. The last thing she heard before losing consciousness was the sound of 13 voices whispering in unison. "Now, you see what we saw." When Ellie woke, she was lying on the cold stone floor of the chamber. The lamps had been reignited, their flames dancing softly. The chair that once held Silas Vexley was now empty. The mirror stood silent and dark, its surface no longer reflective but dense, like the surface of a deep lake on a moonless night. She tried to move. Her limbs were stiff, her head pounding. But the worst sensation came not from her body, but from behind her eyes. A dull ache pulsed there, as though something had been inserted into her skull while she was unconscious. Memories returned in flashes. The mirror, The voices, the children, the eyes. She crawled to the edge of the chamber and used the wall to stand. Her reflection wasn't visible in the mirror, not anymore. Instead, it showed an empty classroom again. A teacher's desk, dust particles frozen mid-air, then movement. A figure entered the frame. Not Ellie, but a child, Maribel. She turned to the mirror, lifted a hand, and pressed her palm to the glass from the inside. Cracks spidered across the surface. Then, one by one, the children appeared behind her. The entire class of 1890, expressionless, waiting. Ellie felt the heat behind her eyes grow stronger. Then, her vision blurred. When she blinked again, she was no longer in the chamber. She was standing in the hallway of Fair Hollow High. But everything was wrong. The colors muted, the lights dim, the walls pulsated slightly, as though the building itself was breathing. Students passed by her, but none made eye contact. None seemed to notice her. She called out. No one answered. Then she saw herself. At the end of the hallway, standing at the entrance of her classroom, was her, or rather, a version of her. Same clothes, same face, but the eyes, black, hollow, watching. Ellie ran. She crashed through the hallway, through doors that didn't exist before, past rooms filled with whispering children, their faces blurred, their eyes glowing dimly. She found the staircase, climbed, pushed through a final door, and was blinded by light. She awoke in a hospital bed, white walls, machines beeping softly. A nurse noticed her stirring and called for the doctor. Ellie tried to speak, but her throat was raw. The doctor entered, a kind man in his 60s, and placed a gentle hand on her wrist. You collapsed at the school, he said. Custodian found you. You were unconscious for nearly 3 days. Ellie blinked, trying to process. Your scans were normal, he added. But there's something you should see. He handed her a tablet. On it, a photo, grainy, clearly from a phone's camera. It showed her, slumped in the basement, just before the paramedics arrived. But there was something else, a mirror behind her, one that hadn't been there before. And in its surface, 13 children, all staring, all smiling. Ellie never returned to Fair Hollow High. She moved states, changed her name, tried to start over, but the pressure behind her eyes never left. And sometimes, when she passes mirrors, especially old ones, she doesn't see herself. She sees them, waiting. Because the truth is, the children of 1890 weren't lost. They were collected, and now through her, they found the eyes they needed to see the world again.